So I can introduce, so I'm Carol Hanlon. I'm a consultant with East Longmeadow Public Schools, and I'm with Interlocking Connections. And with me is Sydney Warshall, who's also a board certified behavior analyst, and Monica Dallahan, who is a consultant and a behavior analyst in East Longmeadow Public Schools as well. So we're happy to be here to share our program review and proposal with you. First of all, we want to thank all the staff from East Longmeadow Schools for their support and assistance with this project. We also want to thank the neighboring districts that allowed us to come and visit their sites and gather information on their programs so that we could make recommendations based upon best practices for preschool programming in our area. Just to give a little overview of our process, we interviewed the preschool staff as well as the administration and other team members to get a better understanding of what the current program model entails and what they felt was working and was not working with the current model. We then met with the teams from 4 neighboring districts to gather information about their programs. We were fortunate enough to be able to bring staff from East Longmeadow Public Schools to all of our meetings and observations. Not everybody to all of them, but we were able to bring someone from East Longmeadow so that they were able to hear firsthand what the other programs were doing and then ask their own questions of our partner districts. So if you want to advance the slide.
There we go.
So the 4 districts that we met with extensively were Ludlow, Windsor Locks, Longmeadow, and Hamden Wilbraham. And just to say again how grateful we were and that they were really available to answer all of our questions and share all kinds of information. So it was a really great process. If you want to go one more slide. What we thought was important for people to hear was the difference between pre-K and K through 12 in terms of expectations and staffing. So for pre-K, it's a rolling enrollment, right? Based on the child when the child turns 3. So a referral is made to the school district when the children are 2 years, 6 months, but they're eligible to begin services by 2 years, 9 months, no matter what date that falls on. So we really have to be able to accept children whatever time of the year it is. So it's not a September to June kind of thing. They could turn 2 years, 9 months in October or November or April, and we have to be ready and able to take them and be able to provide for their needs. Want to move?
So looking at East Longmeadow's current program model, the current model for East Longmeadow has students in preschool attending school 4 half days a week. The day is split up into 2 2-hour and 25-minute sessions, and students either attend the AM session or the PM session. On Wednesdays, there are no students in the building. This time is reserved for IEP meetings, evaluations, time to write and revise IEPs, as well as contracted prep time for the teachers. There are some students with significant needs that do stay for extended days. This is based upon their IEP. In regards to caseloads, the preschool teachers schedule all of the annual review meetings and are responsible for the paperwork that's related to the IEPs. There is also an early childhood coordinator who schedules the 3-year reevaluation meetings. The early childhood coordinator also has additional responsibilities that will be addressed later in the presentation. So this chart shows the breakdown of the preschool students in the district. Oh, will you go back one, Gordon? There we go. That's okay. So this chart shows the breakdown of preschool students in the district. As you can see, there's a slight dip in enrollment during the 2021 to 2022 school year, or 2020 to 2021 school year. This is mostly related to COVID. For this school year, the enrollment numbers are back and trending upwards with 40 preschool students in total in East Longmeadow.
So now we're going to start looking at the differences between and the similarities between East Longmeadow and the other districts that we looked at. On this slide, we see that all the other districts we looked at provide services 5 days a week. And in this grid, you can also see that the total number of special education students and peer partners per district. All the other schools, with the exception of Hamden Wilbraham, all of their preschool programs are run out of one building. Hamden Wilbraham runs programs out of 3 buildings in their district, just to give you an idea of that. In this slide, we see the number of teachers by district and the number of full and half-day sessions. Neither East Longmeadow nor Windsor Locks offers a full-day preschool at this time. There are separate ASD preschools or PreK programs in Ludlow, Windsor Locks, and Longmeadow, but not in Hampden, Wilbraham, or East Longmeadow. One of the pieces that we saw in the other programs that really was interesting to us was a designated person in charge of pre-K, whether they called it the program coordinator, the administrator, or the supervisor. But this position was important in a number of ways. The person was that first and most constant contact with the families before they entered and after they entered school. So there was they attributed a large sense of trust to the district based on the relationship they were able to develop with this one person. That person also took on other responsibilities of the teachers, allowing those teachers to be able to successfully support students 5 days a week. Also on the slide, you'll see the breakout of service providers for pre-K, as well as the fact that other districts have specials for their pre-K students, including music, art, physical education, and library. East Longmeadow does not offer those at this time. And transportation is offered to all IEP students in all 5 districts.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry, can I just ask a question about especially the role that was either deemed coordinator, administrator, supervisor?
Yes.
Is that distinction made by those other districts based on certifications or qualification, or was that term used interchangeably absent of any kind of credentialing?
It was interchangeably. So with Ludlow was an administrator, and it was Gordon can tell me what category she was in. Windsor Locks was a coordinator, so it was an early education coordinator role. So all the districts have different kind of tracks. And then
Licensed administrator, Windsor Locks probably would have something similar to a director
But
position.
operating under like the equivalent of a director's license in Massachusetts?
Correct.
Okay, so they were licensed still as an administrator in order to be able to do the duties of this position.
We would have to check into Windsor Locks more as to
Okay.
what the Connecticut licensure
Okay.
was. But as far as I understand it, the Ludlow administrator was a licensed Massachusetts administrator, because this was the discussion that we had as we put the final pieces of this presentation together.
Okay,
Longmeadow has a supervisor,
Okay.
and the person is a BCBA and servicing students within the program, but is not necessarily a licensed administrator.
okay.
Has
So-
taken on the role of supervising on a somewhat daily basis, their pre-K program, but it still falls within the building. And the building administrator has the
So
ultimate
they have the
responsibility.
title supervisor, but they don't necessarily have like the Department of Ed license.
Correct,
That equates to a supervisory role.
correct.
Okay, I just wanted to just
Yep.
get that clarification because those 3 terms mean
Yeah,
very different things.
and we
especially
knew
when
that.
you attach
Right.
licensure to it.
And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we had all 3 terms, because it does, due to licensure, mean different things.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure. Are there pieces to this, Carol, that you wanted to go on in terms of this slide?
there's nothing else. You can move into the next one.
So as a part of this review, we examine the process for determining student need as they transition into school. Presently, all districts, including East Longmeadow, complete a screening process for each child prior to the transition. All districts also consider information shared by early intervention teams. Additionally, some districts utilize an extended observation period of approximately 4 to 8 weeks, depending upon the district, to determine student need, including assessing staffing support necessary for the child after he or she has had the opportunity to settle into the program. The most widely used tool for these extended observation periods is the VBMap, which is an assessment and curriculum guide based on 170 developmental milestones, as well as research from the field of ABA. It provides a clear and accurate picture of an individual child's abilities, as well as the potential language and learning barriers that may be hindering the process. Finally, we looked at BCBA support utilized by the PreK programs around us. Ludlow currently has one full-time BCBA working with the program. Hampden-Wilbraham has 2. Longmeadow has 1 BCBA, as was mentioned previously, whose time is split between coordinator and BCBA responsibilities. And Windsor Locks and East Longmeadow currently employ consultants in this role.
Does everybody know what a BCBA is? Just, we throw a lot of acronyms out, but since,
Yeah, my apologies.
no, Board Certified Behavior Analyst.
Mhm.
We have consultants that come in not only for our pre-K program, but we also have consultants, BCBA consultants that come in for other programs as well throughout the district.
And if I could just interject,
Please.
I did have an introduction prepared.
Yeah, I apologize.
If I could just interject that Interlocking Connections has provided our entire district with BCBA support in all 5 of our schools and has been a tremendous resource to us as we've shifted and shuffled for the past 2 years. So we selected Interlocking Connections to do the program evaluation based on the fact that they are a third party. However, they are a third party that has context with our staff, our buildings, and our functioning. And as you can see, they also have relationships with some of the other neighboring school districts. So it just seemed like a very good fit.
And so my apologies as we got into the audio problems. Also on screen, I should say, through via Zoom, we have Mrs. Lodi and Mrs. Shea, the principal and assistant principal from Meadowbrook. So everyone is here, and I apologize for the audio
If I could
problems.
just say this, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No.
I was just going to say, this has been a work in progress for quite a while. We did have a little interruption with the events of the last 2 years, but this is something that we were able to formalize because of some grant funding that we received last year.
Mr. Mackey, you were.
Sure.
Okay.
Did you have a question, Mr. Funk?
No.
I interrupted.
Where,
Far right.
any more? Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. Please ask the host to give you permission.
Mine says it's recording, just so you know, Don. Don, on
You
my
you
screen,
might
it
still
says
be
it's
recording, Don.
I am still recording.
Oh.
I'm just not sure if I'm recording audio. I
Ah.
have. it on my computer.
Okay. We're holding just for one more moment.
Did you send a request, Gordon, or no?
No, I don't know. It doesn't give me an option to send a request. We'll hold on that thought. BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst. There will be a quiz later.
Here you go.
I'm gonna ask what I can do.
Okay, we're recording now.
Okay.
I think one of the things that was being presented before we got into BCBA's was the first column. The other districts clearly established a period of time where using the tool of the Verbal Behavior Milestones Assessment and Placement Program, they're able to assess truly what a child's needs may be as that child enters into a structured preschool program, which is a lot different than obviously what might be taking place in early intervention in someone's own home. I'll hand it back off.
Okay, I think that we're ready for the recommendations. Based upon the information that we've presented, our first recommendation would be for East Longmeadow to move to a 5-day-a-week model. You noticed in a previous slide that the neighboring towns and districts all operate with the 5-day-a-week model, so that's our first recommendation. Our second would be to establish a third pre-K classroom for students with significant and complex needs. This classroom would address the needs of those students requiring intensive instruction in a specific area or areas in order for that child or those children to access the pre-K program curriculum. And then finally, exploring full day programming for the future. And you did notice earlier in the presentation that some, but not all, of the neighboring districts that we worked with have that full day programming available for some students. Okay.
So just to clarify, sorry, on that side. So then bullet 1, so it's 5 full days, 5 days a week, but the half-day model.
Half day model, right?
A go Monday through Friday AM, cohort B Monday through Friday PM.
PM, right.
But if I
You
could
s-
just
yeah, please.
interject, there are some students who have an extended day.
Okay,
So there might be some students who go
Right.
longer than the, 12 and a half hours a week now.
Okay.
For preschool, and then some of them, that way they can spend time in the classroom.
Yep.
And they're not getting out.
okay.
If I'm correct and jump in, Carol, Monica, Sydney, all 5 programs have a half-day portion.
Yes.
Also, in some cases, some of the 5 have a full day piece to it. And then they have clear criteria as to who might qualify for the full day versus a half-day program. Would that be accurate?
Yes, and that's based on information that they gain from the VBMap and other assessment tools to determine whether they, which program the child was more appropriate for.
And what we're seeing as we have gone through this work is that we know this is going to be more than a 1-year transition. And so the 5-day-a-week model seems like that's a recommendation that we can make happen in our preparation for next year.
Okay.
I don't know that we've gotten enough information to set the criteria and move into full day programming and have our staff ready to.
Because this year,
do
we're
that.
reading, right, we have 10 students roughly average per classroom right now.
I believe so. Yeah. Is that right, Renee?
Plus or minus.
Averaging about 10 students per section?
Sorry, at the moment, we have some sections that are smaller than others due to the intensity of need within particular classes. So they range anywhere from, I would say, 9 to probably closer to 12.
Go to a full day model, would we need to double our classroom capacity? Number of classrooms?
Yeah, so you would need, yeah, because now you want to deal with ratios. Am I correct? Dr. Welsh? Right.
Well, there are ratios that we have to.
We have to
adhere
follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I
Mrs.
mean, in
Slaughter
terms
does
of the
it.
peer, are you talking about the peer?
No, more staff to,
Oh, staff.
But also peers to students. with
Correct.
IEPs.
but we do get out of that balance some, as we go throughout a year, unfortunately, which is challenging.
And again, the nature of the preschool program is that you have to have a program in place for an eligible child on their 3rd birthday. So as the year moves forward, sometimes it becomes increasingly difficult because
Correct.
we're mandated to create that program. You can, for a child at 2-9. That's unusual, but it has happened. It does happen. But as the year moves forward, all of those ratios, predominantly the ratios of children with IEPs to children who don't have IEPs, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge to make sure that we're compliant.
Now, the one thing I'm concerned about rushing into full day too quick is that I do know one of the systems that we were discussing, they do have full day programming, but those kids are in the same classroom full day. So they're kind of, I understand why they do it, but they're getting doubled up on some things. So it's like, you know, they might be sitting through a morning school twice. And for some students, that might be a good thing. But, you know, I want to be thoughtful of that as we're moving
Right.
forward.
Right.
Because you're saying some come half day morning,
There's
some
no-
come, but
yeah.
then some stays throughout the whole day.
Right, there's not
Okay.
one particular class that's just
just
full day.
full day.
Right, so it's,
I see.
So they have kids that just need to be there the whole day and they stay there.
Yeah.
But they'll get double, and then in between maybe resting in the classroom, or the teachers are transferring from morning to afternoon, or however that might be. So that's
I-
just something to keep in the back of your mind.
I-
I think it needs to be thoughtfully done.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Would we be able to add specials?
We are looking to, and actually, I think it's on a coming slide, right? Is it on a slide coming up?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have two more, sorry, I have two more
Oh,
questions
sorry,
on the
yeah,
slide.
okay.
So the second bullet, establishing a third pre-K for students with significant and complex needs. Would that also follow the peer model? Or is that talking about creating a substantially separate classroom exclusive of peers?
That would be more of a substantially separate classroom. One of the things I had hoped to be able to say was that the needs of our program have changed
Mhm.
quite a bit, and we have more students who require more intensive programming. And so to provide more continuity throughout their day, less disruption to their day, and a greater opportunity to provide more services, those students would be in more of a self-contained classroom, but they would have access to the other preschool. So, you know, we would be looking to do some integration with some of the other classrooms if it were appropriate for those children.
And I'm assuming that that would also then be communicated to families, so that they knew
Mhm.
where their child was being placed as a result of
Those
particular
are individually
diagnoses.
determined in
Okay.
IEP meetings,
Okay.
so yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Just going back to the class size, is 9 to 12 the right size number of students in the classroom?
I believe you can have, Mrs. Lodi is usually the person who does, I believe you can have as many as 14. In a self-contained classroom, I believe the cap is 9.
Okay.
You can have higher numbers in the preschool classrooms. What really starts getting impacted, is the peer to IEP ratio as the class sizes change. So up to 12 students, the recommendation is less than 50% of the class be comprised of students with IEPs. 13 to 14 students, it's 6 as a maximum. 15 students, it's 7 as a maximum, and 16 to 20 students, it's 5 as a maximum. So there kind of comes a tipping point where the number of students on IEPs drops significantly, and it also impacts your staffing ratios that are required in each room as the class sizes change.
Are we turning peers away?
We sometimes have a waiting list for peers, and we sometimes don't, because the 4-day, half-day month, not that popular. So I would envision that might become more of an issue, and there is a waiting list that's created at Meadowbrook.
Okay.
And if I could just say, that was one of the reasons why we wanted to revisit our preschool
Yeah.
program, was because the 4 half days it just wasn't meeting a lot of needs.
Yeah.
So based on the information we collected during the program review, we provided some recommendations related to staffing. So as of now, there's only 2 pre-K teachers. So we are recommending to add a third pre-K teacher for that separate classroom. We're also recommending adding a dedicated pre-K supervisor, which could be a part-time position. And then another recommendation is to have service providers dedicated to pre-K if possible. As of now, there are service providers that are building-based and do provide services to preschoolers, but they also do provide services for the kindergarten to second graders. And then the last recommendation as it relates to staffing is to have contracted service providers for walk-ins as well as for those specials that we mentioned previously.
So as you know, and it says up on the slide, you have the pre-K teacher position is in our budget request. And certainly that's something that as we move forward, we can get through the operational budget and through our request. The dedicated pre-K supervisor, that's something that we want to look into more and specifically look at, if you go back and you look at the chart that talks about Longmeadow's model, is if we were to use something like that, especially when you're talking about dedicating certain service providers just to the pre-K, which we think is probably a wise idea. How is that working for them? How do they break the sort of the responsibilities? And that's something that we could next year carry both through the grant, as well as there is a revolving account right now from the tuition, and you could have that position sustained there and then ask for it in the operational budget as we move forward.
The tuition can't sustain it because it's only 11 students paying tuition.
Tuition account also pulls in a student's tuition that is tuitioning into our ASD program. Am I correct on that? The West.
Yes, that account does
Yeah.
have that.
Same
those funds
Same
in there.
account,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, it is. I have a different charge code that I use for early childhood tuition as compared to a special ed tuition, but that one we were referring to, this is the last year of that, but those funds have accumulated in there, and I think we had a conversation at a recent school committee meeting where I said I anticipate at the end of the fiscal year, we would have about $200,000 in that tuition revolving account, so we certainly could be able to.
But it's tough to fund a position off of revolving.
Well,
No, that wouldn't be forever. This is
No,
just,
just to
we
get it up and
haven't,
going, yeah.
right now, we haven't defined what that position is going to be. So rather than, we couldn't put it into the budget request,
Right.
but we do know that this is going to be a process that transitions probably over 2 school years, if not more, as we look to put more things in place. I think the keys in terms of the recommendations so far on these slides is we know we want to go to a 5-day a week, which is going to be probably will be beneficial for our students, our families, but I think it also will be beneficial for our staff once they get used to it and we start to look at how we bring in some of the elements of these other programs. We also know that while we're looking at that in sort of the half-day model, you have 2 programs in there in Windsor Locks and Longmeadow that continue to operate very similarly to us in terms of running half-day, 5 days a week, with a few students, as Dr. Welsh had mentioned, who do have extended services on specific days or every day of the week. And so we would probably be aligning ourselves or modeling ourselves closer to those programs, at least next year, than we would be to say a Ludlow or some of the other ones.
So the service providers, with 29 students on IEPs, pre-K students, how do we justify full-time service providers for just the pre-K program for 29 students? I imagine
So-
the SLP's caseload is much higher than that. The OT, all of
Correct.
them.
I think it's dividing up. It's not so much that you're going to put every single service provider dedicated. I think it's redefining what the responsibilities
Don't
are.
do that now, or do we share? They're shared in the building.
They're shared within the building. They're also, in terms of our OT folks, they're shared amongst buildings. And so I think we have to look at that also as a whole and start to redefine how we're scheduling. And contracted services are going to come into play on that. That's the final bullet. Instead of having Meadowbrook absorb the services for our walk-in, and that's a term we use for students who might not be going to school in the district, but are residents of the town, that we actually establish that in another setting with some of the contracted services that we have in the district.
So I have a question about that.
Sure.
As being a walk-in speech mom for a few years there and continuing forward with that until 3rd, 4th grade, I know that we have some fantastic contracted service providers. Get that. I understand that. But it's a consistency that for me as a parent at that time is extremely important. And I liked the fact that the people that my daughter had, because we didn't do, we could have, but we chose not to do that. because we went off-site for more speech because it was fun, that there's a consistency year in and year out with that. And I guess that's my concern with the contract service providers. I know many of them are there for years.
We have a contracted service provider who's been with us for 9 years.
Right. But I guess I just want to make sure that the walk-in students are getting consistency that
Sure.
they can get when they hit kindergarten too. The same person, they see the same people, that sort of thing.
So
that's my
our
concern.
actual plan was to utilize the individual who's been working with us, although working specifically for an agency, but we contracted the agency and has been with us for 9 years. That was the individual we were looking to pick up the walk-in services.
And they'll be somebody familiar when they get there in kindergarten.
Mhm.
They don't have them.
Right.
If I could, yeah, I think it's more of a reallocation of some of the resources that we already have.
Right.
At this point, we've always, for one reason or another, the staff have really determined their own individual schedules, staying with certain children, whatever
Right.
the need might be. Children who need technology, in order to communicate and things like that. So really what we're doing is just reallocating the resources that we have and accessing contracted services, maybe in other areas. When Mr. Fredette and I were sort of talking about that, it was, you want to say what you thought about?
Well, it was kind of what Beth has said, but as the reverse, is I feel like if you're going to be a child in an integrated preschool, it's very effective to have the staff working together that are part of that building to be part of that integrated preschool experience, not necessarily move a contracted service into the preschool.
Right.
Rather than have a contracted service move in other areas that you could still have great impact for students that aren't your youngest, newest learners. It's better to have your staff.
Service providers now.
Oh, yes. In pre-K?
No, not in pre-K.
Not for speech language.
So
No.
there's 2 SLPs and an assistant SLP at Meadowbrook. They all work with pre-K. Is that what you're saying? You're saying to reallocate and have just one,
Correct.
not only do pre-K, but also part of the
Right.
rest of the early childhood school, but not the other 2
Right.
individuals.
Right.
Okay.
So we have 2 full-time SLPs and 1.5 SLPAs
Oh, okay.
at Meadowbrook.
Okay.
And then-
They're shared.
They all go into the
Right.
preschool, the pre-K.
But they're all shared in the building.
Right.
Pre-K to 2. So. what
So
you
it's
would do
looking
is-
at that, it's reallocating that, it's, looking at what the 3 classrooms look like.
So not necessarily more staff necessarily, it's specifically SLP. I know there's
Right.
other. contractual-
It's doing a better job of organizing
Yeah,
it.
I mean, that was my concern. To put a full-time SLP for 29 students who probably all don't get speech per se, maybe most of them do, but 29 seems like anyone's caseload.
It would be like for a caseload, and I think the majority of them do get speech
Okay.
and language.
Right.
Well, because it's a developmental
Yep.
kind of situation, but what we've been discussing all along, just to, reassure you, is the idea of reallocating the resources that we had. And having contracted services will enable us, if we need to fill in other areas,
Yes.
but kind of,
Okay.
But I would have to
You'll do
imagine
the
that.
OT I'm sorry. You'll do that with OT too, in terms of walk-in. I
that's
just
what
want
we're hoping
consistency. I
to
want
do. We don't have
consistency for
walk-ins,
walk-ins.
we
You don't
don't
do
have.
walk-ins for OT?
No, we do them if
Oh.
we need them, but we haven't for many, many years. So
Alright.
truly right now, the children who receive walk-in services receive them for speech and language.
All right.
That could change, but that's where we are at the moment.
I was just gonna add that, yes, 29 seems like a small caseload, but you're also working with half the amount of hours in terms of points of contact with that child. So if you have to provide services for a student who goes to school full day, you have that 5+ hours where you could touch that student in terms of their services.
Okay.
Now you're thinking about, yes, half of that, but you only have 2.5 hours to pull that child from, as opposed to the duration of an entire
Right, but
day.
they pull them to do their IEP specific.
Or they go
amount
into
of
the classroom.
Or they
Time,
go-
right, or they go in the classroom, so they're getting their hours.
But I'm saying I'd
even though
have to
they're
imagine that that's way more complex in terms of scheduling when you don't have as many points of contact over the course of a day as you would with like a kid who's going to school 8 45 to 3.
So two things from Mrs. Trulio's point. The first one is that 3, 4, and sometimes 5-year-olds, you really want to have as little disruption as possible. Just right now they're in preschool 10 hours a week. And so as much as you possibly can, you want them to be in preschool. That's why they're there. And so you want to, allow them, that's their inclusion time, right? So that's their opportunity to be with other children and to learn, some of those school skills and so forth. And the other point is that because you're talking about 3, 4, and sometimes 5-year-olds, those are multiple sessions a week, probably 2, more likely 3, and sometimes more than that. So that, with 29, and I know that with speech and language pathologists, there's caseload is not always the most accurate representation of what they're actually doing, because some of those children might see an SLP and there's short sessions, but again, settling a 3-year-old down and getting them ready for for therapy can be a challenge. So it's actually quite a bit of time, even though it's not quite a bit of children.
You gotta walk down, get them back.
You can see Renee nodding her head.
Yes.
in agreement.
Yeah, one of the things I treasured that many years ago, a parent wrote me a poem, and the title of the poem was "How Many Walks Today?" And it was, her little friend had a lot of services, and that's, how she thanked all of the therapists.
Yeah.
She would ask him every day, "How many walks today?"
Other questions on this slide?
Just that last bullet, it says contracted service providers for walk and speech specials. So does that mean we'd be looking at like PE being contracted?
So
and-
this is something that just within the last few weeks, I would say, came into our discussion, but I'll let Dr. Welsh, she has a good way of presenting this.
Well, as we really examine the idea for a full day program, first of all, we want to make sure that we give the children in the program as rich a day as we possibly can. But Mrs. Lodi would be, I would be remiss if I didn't, respect a conversation that we also have with her, which is that teachers need contractual time for preparation for lunch and so forth and so on. And one of the ways to accomplish that would be through specials. If we're not adding staff, we have contracted vendors who already work with us. For example, we have music therapy for some of our students, and so using those people creatively to provide those specials as is developmentally appropriate, for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, for things like music, physical education, or we have adaptive physical education already in place, but not an employee of the district, a contracted employee. That was one way. We thought that maybe we could meet some of those needs without creating a need, because I think we're all really respectful of the position we've always had, without creating a need to hire more staff, but to, check off some of those other boxes for that. So that is where probably we would start.
And then to that point around respecting prep time and those pieces, the transition then from Wednesdays being no students, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 separate bullets that are, or 4 separate items that live underneath that. Where have we talked to teachers about those? Like, they understand that if they go to a 5-day
So-
model, where do those?
So the teachers, we did have a staff meeting around this for our pre-K staff. And in looking at the other models, what they're doing, you're probably still going to have a shorter day, because most of these models build it at the end of the day. So as the preschool dismisses, that's when they have their prep time. That's when they have their meeting time. Unfortunately, a lot of them run into that they have to sub for meetings, that they can't get all their meetings done at the end of the day. So the prep time and that piece may be taken care of by the end of the day. But the reality is that you may have to sub for IEP meetings.
There is a band of time between the A and then the PM session that.
Could
Also
also be used.
could be utilized.
Now, is there enough time there? Because talking from experience, the kids are gone, the cleaning, the parents are in there, they're cleaning, the teachers are organizing, they're eating their lunch, the kids are coming in. Like, it's like they're eating their lunch and the kids are coming. Like, there's no, so will there be that kind of thing, staff, pairs, whatever, to help with that transition? Is that going to change at all?
Well, there are still paraprofessionals, we have dedicated paraprofessionals for preschool now. We may have to look at how they work and doing things a little bit differently. And I think that is a good question. And it's definitely a detail that,
Just because you're missing that Wednesday.
Correct.
And I'm assuming some of
Correct.
those jobs will be filtered out to other positions possibly. Like, are they going to be as detailed with their IEPs, or is there the coordinator going to be doing some of that?
That's,
Wednesday?
yeah.
exactly. So that's something that
So-
we're still.
That's where we really want to look at this model in terms of Longmeadow. How is the coordinator interacting with a lot of that piece? Where are you taking things off of the classroom teacher and others so that you can have them be more dedicated to their jobs, as well as handle some of the other things that you were talking about?
I do know, and Carol might be able to weigh in on this. With, generally speaking, in some of the other districts, the dedicated, and I'm just going to call the person a supervisor, does have some IEP writing responsibilities, which is not the case at the moment. So we don't have folks for that right now. Teachers are responsible
writing the
for that
IEPs.
sort of thing, but that is incorporated into many of the other districts' supervisor roles.
Are there details that we're missing here? As Dr. Welsh and I answer those questions?
I don't think so. I think you guys are covering all the things that we've gone over. Yes.
Okay. In terms of prep time and meeting time, as you all were in those districts and those models, were there things that we missed there?
I don't think so. I think you covered all of those. And I think that that was a great point too, about that pre-K supervisor taking on some of those IEP responsibilities as they do in some of the other districts, because, taking that paperwork piece so that the teachers can focus on what they need to for the classroom and then do the IEP goals and objectives as a part of that. It will definitely free up some of the time. And that was the intention as part of that recommendation.
And just really quickly, while we're talking about that position, one of the things that the Interlocking Connections team really emphasized with us is the need to really foster those strong relationships with EI, with early intervention, so that we develop kind of a repertoire of familiarity with the various agencies, with the various personnel, rather than start looking at each situation as a new situation. One of the things that has been a goal for all of us is improving the relationships that we have with the various early intervention agencies, so that these transitions are a little bit more seamless for everybody. It's a very challenging transition. It's a challenging transition for a family to have people in your home servicing your child with you there and handing your 3-year-old off to a public school. So that's something I would be really excited about working on, is kind of having our go-to people and so forth, so that that becomes a little bit easier as we, as we place kids and as we provide services.
You ready for the next slide?
So based on the tuition in the neighboring districts that we visited, we're recommending that East Longmeadow charge somewhere between $2,000 and $2,200 for the half-day preschool sessions.
I think currently we charge 1,800.
Yep, They pay up front at 17.
What about full day? What's that typical for this?
Yeah, do you remember what the full day tuition was?
I believe it was closer to 6,000.
6,000. There's room to go up a little bit if you want. I think that's the final slide.
That's the end of our presentation, yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, what do you need from us?
Basically, we need your endorsement to, and probably to set the tuition price, and then we'll continue to build on this.
Or let's go to 5 days.
Our short-term goal is to go to 5 days a week. The half-day programming, we would model it, and please jump in, anyone, if I'm missing something. We would model it probably closer to Longmeadow's and Windsor Locke's program right now, because they would be the closest 5-day, half-day. But they do have a few students who have the extended day, similar to what we have. I think we have to do professional development around the VBMap. And it's really developing and seeing what do we need in terms of what's going to work best, in that role of service provider and supervisor. Because the way at least Longmeadow seems to do it right now, is that individual goes out and has a lot of the connections with early intervention, in addition to being a BCBA.
Are
So-
you maintaining the curriculum that they use now when they move into next year? Are you tweaking that, changing that, make a step?
So much of the curriculum is really determined by the needs of the students in the group and what their IEP goals are, so.
Well, for the peers, I guess, like, I know that, like, but like, is there something that's set and that?
So that's a really good point. We currently have 2 preschool teachers and one of them will be retiring. We're going to have the opportunity to have two-thirds, of the staff being new and kind of
Right.
providing some, certainly, some elements of the program are very definitely going to stay the same, but as new folks are brought in, there may be some things that look different as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives us an opportunity, especially if we're able to do it over 2 years, 2 school years, and really do it well in terms of the transition. We can start to look at what are our curricular needs and should we be adopting some of the new things. And it's, I don't know if it sounds harsh or not, but every opportunity that you have in a retirement or every retirement you have provides you an opportunity to make some changes because you have new people coming in, as Dr. Wells said. And so that's a transition time anyway. And so that's a time where you might be able to take a look at new curriculum and so forth.
Dr. Wells says she's testing on VBMap,
Yes, yes.
but I don't know what it is.
Do we have someone explain just a quick synopsis of VB mapping? I need the professional development as well on this. Anyone want to take that on? Just a quick synopsis.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So the VBMap has 3 different sections. And so what it does is it provides a baseline level of performance for the students, a direction for intervention, and then a system tracking skill acquisition section, as well as a framework for curriculum planning. So it's not just like a diagnostic tool. It also helps with curriculum planning. And then the 3 parts, there's a milestone assessment. So that really is, it shows where the child's existing verbal and related skills are. And that could be just, for example, the areas of social play, early academics, and then maybe group and classroom skills. Then there's another section called the VBMap barriers, and that's really barriers to accessing the curriculum. It could be behavior issues, it could be instructional control, prompt dependency, the amount of help that the student needs to perform a task in the classroom. And then finally, it looks at the transition assessment. So that assessment it's typically after the child enters, and we've been using the VBMap with them for a while. It helps us to identify whether a child is making meaningful progress and has acquired skills necessary to access a less restrictive environment. So it's really helpful in, if we have a student who is receiving one-to-one instruction with a paraprofessional, it tells us, when can we start transitioning away from that? When can we look at including the child more within the regular classroom setting? So that's also really helpful.
And we do have
Is that
able to do the VBMap, but we would really want to broaden that,
Right.
just so that we're not having one person doing all of that.
I just thought of
Thank you,
another-
Monica.
I just thought of another thing. Are you going to be differentiating between the morning and the afternoon? Are you going to have the younger ones in the morning, the older ones in the afternoon? I know that's like a nightmare, but in terms of parents, we get to, or, because they you got a 5 in there with a 3-year-old, and sometimes, I don't know.
I don't think we've set that schedule yet. I know that a lot of our scheduling right now is on hold while we were waiting to finish this evaluation.
I guess I'm just feeling that sometimes you get that really young 3-year-old and they're 2.9, and then you have a child who missed that cutoff and they're like a solid 5.
Right.
And that's huge. It's like lifetime difference.
Well, the scheduling genius is Mrs. Lodi, and we've done it 2 ways. There was a time when we had 3-year-olds in the morning, 4-year-olds in the afternoon. And then more recently, we've looked at kind of more of a blend. And the blend is really based on the needs of the students and, with their age taken into consideration, but really more how to have a classroom that's more functional than just sort of adhering to the girls go morning, 4-year-olds.
Right. No, I mean, you may have a 5-year-old that needs to be in a 3-year-old class. I understand that. It's just you don't do. I mean, as a parent, I wouldn't want a 5-year-old that was in your, I would like there to be other kids that they can peer themselves.
Right.
So just think.
I think what's more important than looking at a child's chronological age is looking at their development and where they are on that spectrum of development, because you can have 2 5-year-olds who are at very different places in their development where it might be more appropriate for them to be with a younger group of students at that time. And that's what the VBMap will really help with.
It seems, and all of you who visited these other programs, please jump in. It seems what the other programs have established is, yes, they've established the 5 days a week, and so we want to go there. But they've also established this relationship and, for lack of a better word, this trust, so that as you're building the IEP off of what may have been going on in early intervention, there's not an immediate, we need this, we need Gordon Smith attached to this person's hip. There's an understanding that we have a staff dedicated to the preschool. This is the staff, and the staff's skill set will be able to supply the support that's needed for the child, and anything additional as we map that throughout the first few weeks, we'll make sure we put in place. And I think that's something that we want to build toward. I think we have a very good relationship with our families. We just have to build that piece earlier in the process is how I'm understanding it.
And I think that introductory extended evaluation period will give us the chance to do our own assessment of what the child's needs are in the appropriate context, so that we can make better determinations about what more is needed.
Recommended tuition from the superintendent.
We want to say up
Nope.
I think, yeah, I think we need to establish something to go forward. 'Cause we-
How you feeling?
Well, if you're going a whole additional day, then I'm gonna go with 2,200.
Yeah, I would.
On motion?
Sure.
Okay, I move that we approve the changes to the pre-K program for the 2022-2023 school year, which would include 5 days per week, half-day schedule, and $2,200 annual tuition.
Second. Motion made by Greg, second by Beth. Any further discussion? I just have a question. Those other positions though, like we're not putting forward those as of right now, just the two pieces. I just want to be.
No,
clear,
so
like,
the two positions, you have one that's in the
budget request.
budget request, and then you have one that we really have to look at and decide, okay,
Okay.
what is this for East Longmeadow? You know, is it a BCBA that right now we predominantly get through consultants? Or, you know, is this something else, another service provider that we are able to
Yes, that
free
one's
up?
just a little gray to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we have to define that better. That's why that one was not asked for in the budget, and it's going to be something that we have to build towards.
All right, any other questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed nay, and that motion carries 5-0. Thank you. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you.
all.
All the good questions.
Thanks, Diane.
Thanks.
Folks from Interlocking, thank you so
It's
much,
nice to meet you.
not only for the presentation tonight, but all your incredibly hard work, and I'm going to say your work going forward, because this is not the end of it. We have a lot of work that we now have to roll up our sleeves to get accomplished. So really appreciate your support. And as always, appreciate the leadership from Mrs. Lodi and Mrs. Shea.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
Have
much.
a good night.
All right.
Good night. Thank you. I know.
All right, so update on MSBA. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. Thank you, Mr. Fredette. Dr. Wells, sorry about the introduction, but you were able to get that in midway through. Okay. Switching gears from our preschool to now looking at the future possibly for our high school. We recently, Mrs. Marjan Boucher and I attended the Mass School Building Authority Designer Selection Panel. We had previously been in the designer selection panel where we took all 8 proposals from design firms, and the MSBA designer panel puts together 16 people, 3 of whom come from the district, Mrs. Marjan Boucher, Mr. Crucial, who is the chair of the building committee, and me as superintendent. And then the MSBA has a sitting group that is made up of both folks from the field as well as individuals who do this work in some capacity for the MSBA to create a 16-person designer selection panel. We went through 2 weeks ago and narrowed the field from 8 to 3. This past Tuesday, we interviewed the 3 firms, design firms, and each firm had roughly, I think, 45 minutes or something, or 30, 35, something of that nature, plus then a question and answer at the end. It was quite substantive, and in the end, they went to their weighted voting, and we have now selected, with the endorsement of the designer selection panel, Jones Whitsitt in partnership with SMMA. We're now into contract negotiation, which is utilizing the template contract coming from the MSBA. And that's something that Skanska International, our owner project manager, is starting to work on. The exciting piece is that SMMA and Margot Jones had done our facility study for all 5 schools. So SMMA and Margot Jones, who has now become or merged and become Jones Whitsitt, have a really good understanding of the district, our buildings, specifically the high school, and a very good understanding of our town, which I think is going to be really important. So hopefully we will navigate through contract negotiations with them relatively quickly and successfully. And we're going to have to hit the ground running, because I know one of the first things that they want to do is speak with the high school staff and faculty before the end of the school year and get thoughts there, and then start working through the process of vested parties and bring in small groups for focus groups and so forth.
Now, does Skanska work with the contract? They do all that?
So they're right now working, there's a specific individual at MSBA who coordinates this. Skanska's in contact with them, and then we will sit down with Skanska and review our overall budget for the feasibility study, because that obviously plays a big role in what kind of contract you negotiate. And then we do have to follow and utilize the MSBA contract template for a designer. Yeah, but Skanska, to answer your question a little bit more succinctly, Skanska takes the lead role in negotiating it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Mhm.
It was a good process. It was interesting how it was done. It was 38 to 35, the two that were really.
I was
there,
very close.
in terms of how they went through, and it was interesting to watch. They're presenting in front of a Zoom, and how the three different companies kind of approached that. You know, you didn't want to fall for shiny lights, or you didn't want this, or you could have a dull presentation, but they were all great. Every one of them brought something. So we ended up, I think the group that the three of us preferred came through, which was good.
Right.
So, but it was interesting to watch that whole kind of nerve-wracking.
It was nerve-wracking towards the end. It's a long process. It was a 3-hour meeting on Zoom.
Yeah.
An exciting movement and a partnership with the state that's hopefully helping us to achieve some great things for the future of the town. So
Absolutely. And so once we have a successful contract in place, we'll send out a press release.
great.
Yeah. And probably have another building committee meeting to make sure that everybody's up to speed on that.
Excellent.
So,
Well, thank you for that update.
sure.
Thank you.
And last, for your
Okay, for the many presentations, I will, again, Mr. Mackey, do you need me to share my screen again for this one?
If you want to share it, sure, it's fine.
Okay, I mean, I am going to put it on behind.
Yeah, but this sharing works great, so.
Okay. I do. I want to do both. All right, let me get out of this.
we have sound.
Okay.
Right.
Do you have that on your screen as well, Mr. Mackey?
You see it there? On the TV?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, okay. So wanted to share, we had in a previous meeting, one of our parents had asked just, what our thoughts were as the warmer weather comes, and we seem to be in a good spot, and we would agree in terms of keeping positive cases of COVID-19 down and basically starting to expand what we do in our schools. And so these next few slides are going to give you an idea of where we are going and also hope to be going as we schedule more events. So just to give you a quick update with health data, one of the greatest things coming out of March was that we had a total for the month of March in the public schools, East Longmeadow Public Schools, 31 reported cases, where back on the 1 week period between January 5th and January 12th, we had for the East Longmeadow Public Schools by itself, 167 cases, positive cases of COVID-19. So there's a great reduction as we move out of March and into the month of April and far away from that month of January. The town reported, and now this is now a couple weeks old, but reported during a similar time frame, 17 positive cases in the 2 week period, March 13th to March 26th. And we have thoroughly moved into the home testing program. We are also doing symptomatic testing for those who have decided to access that. And some are still deciding to access that each week. And so we're making that available. But those families who would like to participate, staff members, we have home testing kits that every 2 weeks we distribute out to our families who have signed up for it. There's a lot on the screen, but one of the things that we had discussed with the leadership team as sort of our litmus test, if you will, was Spartanum, because Spartanum was going to be an event that had not taken place in front of a live audience for 2 school years. Because if you remember, we shut down on March 13th, and the 13th, that Friday the 13th, was going to be the first night of Spartanum. So they haven't had a live audience, an audience that outside of, say, the high school in 2 years. And as a leadership team back in February, we were discussing this and saying, okay, well, that's going to be a litmus test because the auditorium can hold over 800 people. You're going to have over 800 people each night. You're going to have obviously all participating in Spartanum. You're going to have the staff who support in the background. How do we come out of that? And we came out of that with just incredible success. And so that was great to see. It was great for our students. It was great for our families. Off of that, the seniors have already held their senior banquet at the Delaney House, and that was a huge success. And coming into the spring now, we're going to have drama club presentations once again and art presentations. Our music department is scheduling concerts throughout all grade levels, not just the high school. The drama club and art presentations at the moment are high school presentations. We also are looking toward the late spring, and we'll have in-person award and achievement ceremony. So we're going to fill up that auditorium once again, which was not something we could do last year when we did the high school achievement night and scholarship night. We look forward to things like the 8th grade semi-formal and field days coming back, as well as Maple Shade's famous jog along. And then field trips have started to be scheduled. That's something that's starting to come through as Mrs. Blair shakes her head because transportation is involved in that. And so they're coming through once again. On a weekly and daily basis, one of the things that we wanted to make sure was uniform throughout all our buildings. So I did ask the principals and assistant principals to make sure that their teachers realize that they have full control to arrange their classroom and desks as they feel is best needed to support what activities that they have planned. So they can change it up. We can move away from keeping everything spaced at, the physical distancing for the entire day. If they need to change classroom design up for a specific activity, then we're saying, please go ahead. And so far, so good. We're bringing back after-school activities at the elementary level. Virtually actually has had at the middle school level, had their after-school activities running, and they'll continue to run. We also have our after-school tutoring coming back. Some of that's peer tutoring with some of our older students, tutoring some of our younger students. At lunch, we're freeing up our students at all grade levels and allowing for more socializing and allowing them to do that throughout the lunch period. Recess, which I think was not necessarily widely known, has always been scheduled with different classrooms mixing. We had, at the beginning of the year, had not changed that or isolated that as we had done in the previous year. So our recess is scheduled in such a way where different classrooms can mix on the playground and utilize, the structures as well as any of the balls or jump ropes or anything that we're providing at recess. And so we'll continue to do that.
I hate to see lunches ever be silent. I know that kids can get a little rambunctious, but I think that lunches should always be their conversation. Sometimes that's debatable in certain circumstances, and it should never. I'm happy that they're able to co-decide. It's truly not one of
The volume has been pumped back up.
good. Maybe we need to get it out.
Okay. Then in-person future planning activities, some of that have already gone on and some that will go on. These are things that looked different last year, but they're going back to a little bit more of the traditional way we've done things. So our counselors and our administrators have already gone over to the middle school and spoken with the 8th graders and had an assembly where, the entire 8th grade listened to some of the things that they can look forward to as they think about the high school, and then certainly breaking that up into smaller groups as they talk a little bit more specifically around counseling and scheduling. Our step-up days at the elementary level are going to be scheduled. We haven't scheduled them to a specific date yet, but they will be scheduled soon. And then our 3rd grade orientation evenings for parents will also be scheduled. Something that we weren't able to do in person last year is we're also going to have our fall sports night for athletes and parents, which is really important. It's especially important for our incoming 9th graders because it's their first run at understanding high school athletics, and that's important. So we're excited. It is a return to some of our more traditional events, and I think the students are really excited about that, but I also know that the staff's excited about it in terms of just seeing the excitement in their students and changing up somewhat of what we just experienced with the Zoom, as we still sort of have a hybrid approach to meetings. It's nice to be in person.
With that point, Gordon, should families feel comfortable then asking, like, if they can come into buildings for certain other aspects, meetings, parent conferences, if they
Sure.
need to,
Yeah.
that's something that they should now feel like they can.
I think they absolutely should ask. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's something that we can talk about certainly as a leadership team. I think we did discuss it, but okay, we did. Thank you.
Versus telemeetings.
Right, like not
Yeah.
assuming, like families don't necessarily need to assume that if I want to have a conference with my child's teacher or if an IEP meeting is taking place, that they have to do it via Zoom. But if they
Right,
feel like they
yeah.
want to come into the building, that they can at least ask for that.
Right.
And if
And the,
spaces
and the
can be
discussion
found,
is
then-
that, that we would be able to do
Okay.
both.
Which
We
is
can do
good.
both. Yeah, that you can still, because there are people that still may want to
Right.
do it virtually, and then
Absolutely.
there are others who want to come in, and we'll find the space that's
Okay.
needed.
But I
That's
think
just
if we
good for
can give them
families
the
to know.
option, I think that's important.
So like how you brought up Spartanum, because I'm sure your daughter remembers, they went into that Spartanum, and it was one of the
was the
full
last day of
school
school.
assemblies,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they came out and the kids were like, what?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
just were like, what? Yeah, it's one of those things I'll never forget.
That was the last thing that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
a good
we-
show, by the way.
Well, it's nice to see that it was one of the first things to happen.
It was, yeah, that was, I think, one of the great part of sort of the reentry, if you will, is that Spartanum let it off, but it also gave us as we came out of the mask mandate,
Mhm.
you're running into 2 live events with audiences that are, packing the auditorium. And so you're going to know pretty quickly whether we're going to be doing this successfully or not successfully. Yeah. So, and thankfully we were able to do it successfully, and then we're going to continue. So,
Well, thank you for that update. Thank you for the
Sure.
schools for providing that information. And again, thank you to the families who continue to reach out to us and ask questions and coming at that in the spirit of collaboration and wanting to see things for the best interest of their own child. So we always thank families for coming forward with that. And then giving us the opportunity to respond and get some additional information out to the public. So thank you for that as well.
Sure.
All right, Pam, your turn.
Oh, I got you. So in your packet is a request from Principal Frank Page, and this is regarding a donation. Please accept the $1,000 check donated by Alex Blaze's family for the East Longmeadow High School class of 2024. This is a beautiful gesture from the family of Alex as they look to honor his memory and give back to his graduating class.
It's beautiful, incredibly touching.
Yeah.
So I move to accept $1,000 check on behalf of Alex Blaze for the class of 2024.
Motion made by Beth,
Second.
second by Antonella. Any further discussion?
I was wondering, do you think that they could put a brick in the walkway for that? I'll pay for the cost.
Sure. You want
Well,
to,
I feel there should be something.
For-
We'll talk about it later, but.
okay, yeah. I think anytime you want to donate a brick, we can certainly do
Well, I
that,
just feel
or,
like they've done this,
we
maybe
can,
give them,
yeah.
You know, a brick to
or
knock
the
out.
school system can put it in. Yeah, that's easy enough. I mean,
Nice idea. Beth. Motion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed nay, and that motion carries 5-0.
I move that we approve the MOU with the ELEA and as discussed in the executive session.
Motion made by Greg,
Second.
second by Bill. Any further discussion? All those in favor,
That was
please
great.
say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed nay, and that motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Don, for helping us tonight. We hope Nick did wonderfully at his track meet today. Stan, but we know he was out there representing the high school. And then what are we doing about adjournment? Are we going back into executive to finish that conversation?
I mean, we should, because otherwise it's 2 weeks. I know it's late though, so, and I've got a cross camp too, but I would stay.
We could probably get it done in like 5 minutes.
Okay, so is there a motion for
I'll move
executive?
How you feeling it now?
I move that we adjourn to go into executive session to return to open only to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Motion made by Bill,
Second.
second by Greg. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed nay. That motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody. We will go into executive.